Welcome back to Sets and Reps. Good to see you. How you doing? Hope you're doing as great as I am. About 4 or 5 weeks left of this semester. And if I pass, I'm moving on to summer clinicals, get to work in a physical therapy clinic setting for the first time. So that's going to be a wild experience, and I'm really looking forward to it. I've been grinding hard these past couple weeks, and I'm not out of the woods yet, but I'm really grateful to have classmates and people around me that are helping me, building me up, and I'm putting in that reciprocation to checking in with my people. Make sure you check in with your people, because you never know what someone's going through, and a simple word, a simple text can really help somebody's day. So like I said, I have people that are in my corner in this program that are kind of checking on me, and I'm doing the best to make sure that everybody else is doing well, getting grades that are good and passing. For today's episode number 14, I got a chance to sit down with a mental performance coach who works with athletes. Now, I didn't know what this career or this position was before I actually got a chance to sit down with him. So we started the conversation by taking a look at some of the things that they don't do. How does a mental performance coach compare to like an athletic counselor? This man actually graduated with an athletic counseling degree from Springfield College. So he went through a job title change. We're going to talk about the goals and the outcomes of mental performance with athletes. What are some of the things that he looks for in the beginning with them, and things that they can work on as they continue. And we also go over some mental skills, 7 mental skills that everybody should work on, everybody should have. It's not just for athletes, it's for regular people too. And so we also talk about building self-awareness, which is actually one of those mental skills. But it's so important. You can't just go through life living like a robot, going through the motions. You have to think about how you're responding to situations. You have to actually analyze thoughts that pop in and out of your head. We talk about the mentality of fixing something that's wrong versus building tools to help you overcome obstacles. And that's a severe part of mental performance. And we're also going to talk about the differences between high school athletics, what some of these individuals deal with versus what a college level athlete might deal with. And we talk about what does it mean to walk in somebody else's shoes. As a trainer myself and as a future physical therapy assistant, I want to make sure that I'm equipped to spend time with someone and to really connect with them on a deeper level and hear what it is that they're going through, and be able to, help them along the way however I can. And so this is what's really going to help me with that. And I hope that you are able to learn something and find value in this as well. As always, I'm going to put time codes in the description. You can hop around, you can check it out, see what interests you. If you're watching this on YouTube, go ahead and leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you can not only be a part of the family, but you can be able to be in the know whenever a new episode comes out. If you're on Spotify, welcome, and go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. We're going to get into this week's segment of circuit training, core training versus abs training. Let's do it. When I say core training, I'm talking about the fact that with any exercise, if you perform it correctly, you can feel engagement of your abdominal muscles in a way that creates almost a wall all around your body. So it's going to support anything that might be susceptible to injury depending on what you're doing, like your lower back, your shoulders, your legs. And it's going to help you accept and redistribute force from multi-directional exercises or jumps. If you're jumping and you have a strong, solid engagement of your core, you're going to be able to move better. You're going to accept force from the ground, and you're going to be able to redistribute force again from the ground. And it just promotes strength and healthy habits. A lot of times when we bend over at our lower back to pick something up, or we kind of roll over and twist our back in a certain way, if we're not using our abdominal muscles in that way of stiffening your core or engaging your core, we're just going to maybe end up with injuries in the future because we didn't necessarily use our body the way that it could have been used to provide us with some of that extra assistance. And so the cue I like to give for all of my clients or anyone that I'm working out with is tense up like you're getting ready for a punch. If someone was coming at you with a fist and they were headed for your gut, what would it feel like to make sure that you're ready for that punch? That's usually what we mean when we talk about engaging the core. And therefore, core training is going to be any exercise where you have to engage your core, keep your body as a unit in one spot while you're doing something else with your other extremity. So for example, I gave the example, again, I mentioned doing any exercise with proper engagement is fine, but you could also do planks, like some kind of mountain climber variation where you're moving your legs quickly while you keep your spine nice and neutral. Again, you stiffen and make that wall around your entire lower body by breathing, bracing, getting ready for that punch. Now, for abs training, what I think about the most is when people want to actually create micro tears in the abdominal tissues. Just like any other muscle, like when you're doing your bicep curl, you can do that same thing with your abs training. Now, what I don't like to see is people doing sit-ups. A lot of times, if they don't give you pain and injury, that's fine. You can continue to do them. You can live in a free country. It's all good. But what can happen in the future with that repetitive bending motion at your lower back when you come and you sit up back and forth like that, you might run into some injuries in the future. And so just to kind of help prepare you for that, I definitely feel like it would be better if you stuck with exercises that allow you to keep your spine neutral. So something like a hanging knee raise with a focus on your hip position and your back in alignment so that you're not curved and you're not swinging your body back and forth. You have nice control. So again, it's going to bring that thing that I mentioned before with that core stability, that core control while you're moving another extremity, but it's also going to target that tissue and help you to increase the size of that muscle. So for example, we've got hanging knee raises, we've got leg raises, and we have lying leg lifts. Now on with the show. Matt Rieger, welcome to the show. Matt is a mental performance coach at Advanced Therapy and Performance in Connecticut. How are you today, my man?
Good. How are you?
Really good, thank you. Close to when we first started connecting. I had been following the Advanced Therapy and Performance page on Instagram for a while. Huge shout out to them. Obviously, an incredible facility, location. They're doing a lot of great work with athletes and just kind of building that next generation, that community of fitness and movement and sport. Great. And then I saw you had popped up on there as an athletic counselor. And since then, we've been kind of talking, chatting, getting ready for this podcast. And you had recently mentioned to me that your job title changed from athletic counselor to mental performance coach. And I know that you got your master's degree in athletic counseling as well. Is that correct?
Yep, I did from Springfield College in Massachusetts.
Okay, awesome. So can you tell me a little bit about what made the change and whether or not the change in job title changed how you operate day to day in your job?
Yeah, it was really just more of a title change just in terms of what we were going for. We wanted to make it as normal kind of as possible. So we didn't want to make it sound like the role of like a counselor sounds a little bit more like clinical. So we wanted like to definitely include coach in there and then kind of mental performance to include into that also with a coach to kind of have athletes be like more willing and open to kind of meet with me one-on-one, as well as just in terms of for like the certification, like I still don't have yet. Like I have the schooling and all for, which is kind of like a new certification, which is like a CMPC, which is a certified mental performance consultant.
Wow.
So we kind of took that, a little bit of wording from that of like what the certification is, as well as to kind of put it as coach, kind of to make it more consistent with that. And also it kind of tells more about what my role is like role is by saying like mental performance type of a coach. It kind of makes it more obvious, where if someone hears like athletic counselor, they might not know exactly what that would be.
That's interesting. Okay, I understand that. So you mentioned that it was to kind of set you apart from the word counselor and how it kind of has clinical connotations. Can you mention a few things about how your day-to-day separates from like a life coach or a therapist, something, because obviously working with other human beings is pretty complex,
Yeah.
not only athletes but just anyone in general. So it takes a certain degree and a certain, it takes a certain personality. So I was just wondering if you could differentiate for me, from a regular counselor to what you are.
I think that the big thing is like I'm not someone who could like diagnose with like some type of things. Like I can't diagnose someone with like ADHD or someone who has like depression. So like that's something I wouldn't be able to do. But I think in myself, like what I took away from like Springfield, like they were rooted, like you learned a lot about mental performance skills, like your self-talks, your imageries, like your goal setting, stuff like that. Um, all of that kind of stuff you kind of learn, but it also was rooted in like a counseling background. So like you also learn like counseling skills, counseling theories, and all of that. So it's not just almost, you're not just teaching
Mm.
like different mental skills. You're also going and like being able to hold like a counseling session because you know those tactics, how to do it, which then helps you build a better rapport and kind of understanding with athletes. Where, because if I was going to go and just tell an athlete like, hey, go and like let's visualize something, like visualize this outcome, they most likely aren't going to want to do it as much. Where if you can kind of get to know the athlete and like build a really good rapport with them from a counseling background and be able to listen, ask questions, continue the conversation, and combine those things, it kind of allows you to then have them understand like, hey, like this is where I can learn and kind of improve rather than just directly telling them. So I think that's where it separates it, is like it kind of takes in and combines a lot of different counseling roles of like, if you think of like a life coach, like there's someone's going to help you set goals and kind of do things for the future. So like, I'm not saying you have the exact same skills as that, but you have similar skills to then also bring in a counseling background, to also bring in like a mental performance aspect, which is important because like those mental skills, you go and like we do them every single day, even if we're unaware of them. So like they really become life skills because like it's stuff that we do all the time in terms of performance, because everything we do in life, it ends up being a performance. So if you can train the mental side of that, it's going to impact your physical side and how you actually come about and do that task. I can talk to someone about like what they're feeling, what they're going through. I just can't be the one to diagnose it. Like we can go up and talk about like the DSM-5, which is like the diagnosing basis of different things. Like we can look at it and do it. I just can't be the one to diagnose it. And then we could also work together with, say, a clinical mental health counselor who's licensed, like at the same time, because we're going to be going through a different expert, like areas of expertise, to then go and like look at what the person is going through, which
Mm.
kind of plays a big role.
So there's like, so you work with other professionals, all these different people that have roles in developing the athlete's success and their mental
Yeah,
and physical health.
yeah, not currently, but I'm saying like in like you could in the future. Like say I'm
Good.
working with someone and like I feel that they might have something that's going on beyond my area of expertise or
Mm.
my knowledge or kind of ability in terms of what I'm qualified to do. I
Refer
can
them.
then go and refer them to like something like that. And it's not a me or that, like me or them. It could be a me and them type of approach with that person or athlete.
Yeah, that's awesome. That helps build a little bit more trust too, because you're kind of not just sending them off, but you're being with them, and that's
Yeah.
really great. I like that aspect. I always try to build rapport with, not only my clients and the people that I interact with at work, but just everyone in general. It just
Mm.
makes the world a better place. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Can you talk to me a little bit about how a mental skills session with an athlete usually goes? And then also real quick, is that a major part of your job, just those sessions in general?
Yeah, that's a big part. I mean, a big part of it is also like being on the floor, kind of building that rapport. Like if you're not around or being present, like people aren't going to want to go and meet with you. So like that's something that is a big part of the job, as well as like kind of being on the floor, building those relationships beforehand. So it's not just like some random person that they're working with coming up trying to book a session with them.
Mm.
I can go and like build that relationship, understand what they're going through. And a big part's also like finding those like themes of what's going on. So it might be talk to an athlete like for a couple minutes, and then you do that over like a 2 or 3 week span where you see them a couple times a week, to then kind of find those trends and themes to be like, hey, like this is something you've been talking about like throughout the weeks, like this is something we could potentially work on kind of going forward, and kind of see what their thoughts are with that. So my general like approach, like how a mental skills like session would go, I start out with doing like a 30-minute eval, which we kind of just go through kind of what my role is, what they will be, like kind of what to expect. So like I kind of explain to them like kind of what I just said, what a mental skills coach would do, as well as explain like this isn't going to be like a quick fix or like some magic thing that's going to go and like drastically improve your performance like out of nowhere. Like that's not how anything really works. I kind of say like these sessions, like if you go and do like a pitching lesson, you can't expect to like have one lesson and then go a week without practicing at all and do another lesson and it make improvement. So I said like there is going to be an expectation to like do these sessions and try out what we talk about, work with it, and like really try and develop that skill to then be able to keep going forward. So I start the sessions out with like a 30-minute eval where I go through like a coping skills inventory,
Mm.
which kind of assesses 7 like different mental skills, kind of just to get a quick understanding. It's only 28 questions, and just to get like a general understanding where they're at in terms of that. And then I'll go through like a pre-eval questionnaire, which is just like a list of 10 mental skills, and I ask them to rate from like 1 to 10 their knowledge regarding like those skills and also their ability to implement them, just to know like where they're at, what they know of different mental skills. And then I ask them after that 30, like at the end of it, of like what particularly do you want to work on going forward? Or is there anything, like I said, in particular you want to work on? So then I can kind of have that info going into like your first like session with them of, okay, here's kind of what we learned from like the coping skills inventory, ask them how they think that relates to their performance. And then also kind of say, this is what you mentioned you want to work on going forward. Is that still something you want to work on? And kind of let them lead the way in the beginning to get that full understanding of where they're coming from and what they want to work on in these sessions.
Okay, perfect. And talk to me about when the time with them is fulfilled.
Mm-hmm.
Are there common things that you see as far as goals achieved with these athletes? Like, you know, their demeanor is changing, for example. Like, are you able to notice those things?
Um, I would say the big thing, especially in the beginning of the sessions, is just by listening to the athletes and hearing what they have to say. I think like a big first step with anything mental skills is like having the awareness of what's going on. So like that's a big part, is like they might be just telling me about some things they find, and in telling those different stories, like I might pick on like a theme that they say something 4 or 5 times in like describing something like a situation, and that kind of allows me to point that out to them. And then they're like, oh, like I didn't even like realize that. And like that, it was almost like that aha moment
Mm.
of, oh, like that's actually like a kind of thing that could help me going forward. Now that I know about it, you can kind of then go and work on that skill or whatever they're having trouble with. It's like the saying of like, you can't know what you don't know. So like if you're not aware of it, you can't fix it to then be able to go forward and keep improving on it. So I think a big change is kind of that awareness that they have about what's going on. Because as I said, like you kind of go through and it's something that anyone can work on these skills. It's not like you have to be struggling in something. Like myself, anyone can work on their mental side of their attitude or kind of how they have perspectives of things. So I think the awareness of it is the big change that you see kind of throughout sessions and kind of as you progress through it.
That's great. That I love that self-awareness. I've been practicing that big time,
Mm.
especially the past year towards the end of it. I'm sure you saw a influx. I don't know if you were working in this position at the time, during the pandemic and all of that. lovely nonsense. Do you feel like there was just a greater growth in the amount of people that you were seeing?
I didn't get I didn't get to ATP until like beginning of September, so it was kind of like the second big wave of spikes.
Yeah.
So like I didn't really see like what it was like during like the initial part of it. Um and then I feel like because I started ATP in September as like an intern, as like a like strength coach intern to kind of learn about it and kind of see what they were about.
That's
And
awesome.
then yeah, and then kind of went and introduced the idea of like a mental performance coach position because it was something that they didn't have, and like I loved the company and the people there, and I wanted to like find a way to stay on with them. So it was kind of introducing this idea. But I think definitely in terms of like they train like a lot of baseball players. I think the big shift for them is kind of like it's the unknown of is there going to be a season for me, especially like this coming spring. Like most high schools are playing a season, but high schools push back to like the beginning of April. So it's kind of like being ready for if you're like almost if your number gets called or if you're going to play a season is like a big aspect because like people are getting ready, and like it could stop or like not have a season. Or even with some college people, like they like some people found out like a month ago, like, hey, we're actually going to have a season type of thing. And it's like, get geared and ready to go to like type of thing, which is a surprise. And that's something that obviously impacts, like, physically you have to get ready, but also mentally, like you might not have the same confidence or whatever you have in yourself because you weren't physically ready. Like that's a big key to like your confidence you have is like, if you're physically preparing for long periods of time type of thing and like, hey, I've done the work, I've prepared my body, I'm all set, that can mentally have an influence of how you perform because you did the work, where now you're rushing that work to then get back into like a season, which you're not doing your normal off season. So it's something to kind of think about and be aware of how that could impact you to then go in like, hey, like, I did what I could, I went and prepared, like body's feeling good, and kind of get yourself into that position.
Yeah, because when mind starts to feel good, then the body is gonna feel good as well. I mean, that mind body connection is something that you're all about as well.
Mm.
So, um, are there specific tools that you give these athletes uh, to prepare themselves so they're not overwhelmed or they're not stressed out if, let's say, for example, if they realize that they got a season and they need to start preparing when they leading up to it were just had no idea whether or not they were going to have one? Do you have specific tools that you
Um,
give
I would
them?
I would say for that it would be the biggest thing is like finding those routines for themselves because like routines and like habits are those things
Mm,
that you have control over. So like if you can kind of start getting into a consistent routine of and not just like training routine or like that, but like also like routines of like if I'm a pitcher or something and I'm gonna like go to the mound, how can I repeat the same delivery with the same intensity each time? So like find ways to build a routine to then get into that mindset or like kind of competitive nature. So like, and that can then help give you or make you feel like you're in more control because it feels more consistent. It feels like you've done it before, you've been there before. It's like definitely a big one, especially in the like with say this circumstance if you've just found out. Because then the more you do it, obviously the more confidence you can have to then build. And then I think the big thing is for like you said, like feeling overwhelmed or stressed is just different relaxation techniques to kind of find what works for you. If that's like breathe different, like actually like knowing different breathing techniques, not just like you hear people yeah like breathe or like relax, but like actually having those techniques.
Nobody's gonna relax if you tell them to relax. It's like it's so
Exactly.
annoying, but yeah, dude,
So like if
100%.
you have those different routines, whether it's breathing, if it's progressive muscle relaxation, if it's like whatever that is for you, to then go and relax the body. So then you are ready in those situations. It can definitely help going forward. So I think those, so like having routines and habits, kind of so you build that confidence, and then having a relaxation strategy that works for yourself in those situations you might feel a little overwhelmed.
It's kind of like reprogramming your brain in just a seriously positive way because like we know that the alternative to that is just sending yourself down in a spiral of just negative feedback loops or whatever is going on in your brain when you're just constantly focusing on the negativity. So that's a great just change in tide as to what I'm sure most of these guys and girls go through. Is there some things that you mentioned? Okay, so you mentioned that you cannot diagnose
issue because it just sounds negative and also puts that negative connotation of like, hey, there's something wrong with you, so you're going to see like Matt type of thing. Where I want this to be more of a, hey, we're going to not only improve what you have, like the skills you have, we're going to find different ways to like maybe find that untapped potential of like some mental skills to be able to pull in there. And I kind of explain it the same, like I kind of explain it like physical, the physical side. I guess I'm getting into what I say rather than what I don't say.
Dude, give it to me all.
So I kind of I try and pitch it as like, if you have like something like with your body, it's like a tightness in your hamstring.
Sure.
It's not that there's something wrong with your body. It's just that you have tightness in your hamstring, and it's something you're going to work on to improve, to increase flexibility. So if you think about it, like mental skills is the same thing. You might have, like we said, like negative thoughts or negative self-talk. That's not something wrong with you. It's just something we're going to work on to improve. And even if it's not getting it to positive, we might want to just get it to neutral. So it's not like negative thoughts that are going through your mind, but just neutral thoughts of things that you kind of want to have happen, or like your process. So like, rather than saying like, I can't do this, you can say like, okay, I'm going to go and like, let's like, just say like, let's go, or like, just do it, or something like that, of like small things that aren't like positive where you have to like try and get there, but just neutral of kind of where you want your mind to go.
A big one that I feel like I use personally a lot is not I have to do this, but I get to do this.
Yeah.
It's a huge one. I mean, it's just that mindset switch right away. And the more you can practice that, the more you just get yourself right back to where you need to be. And that's amazing. In terms of the age range of athletes that you've worked with, do you see similarities between those things that you improve upon, not those things that are negative necessarily, or that because they have anything wrong with them, but those things that you improve upon? Are there similarities that you see? And then also comparing to like high school to college level, what are the biggest differences between those things?
Yeah, I think similarities is, I think that once again, I mean, the similarities can be like everyone can improve upon how they look at things. So I think a lot of us become like outcome focused in terms of like we see people's like highlights, or we see like the end product of things, but not the work that gets put in. So like I feel like a lot of people will chase that end product, or like, oh, I'm not at a certain weight for lifting, or I'm not at this, but like they don't see the work that the people that did get there, how much work it took to actually get there. Because with the digital age and social media and everything, you're seeing people's highlights of someone's PRing on a certain lift, or someone's throwing X speed. And that person might be like, if you're a high schooler, you might be like 16 or whatever it is, and you're comparing yourself to a pro guy or college guy who's 23 or 24. And it's like, well, there you go. Like they've put in the work to get to this point. So I think that's the big difference that I see. I think in a lot of high schoolers, you see a lot of the thoughts of comparing themselves to like their peers and other people. So like to start out, you're comparing and competing against others, which yes, that is a form to motivate yourself. But at the same time, like most likely there is going to be someone better than you. So like it could discourage you, where if you're competing against yourself, then you kind of can see that growth. So like you have like high schoolers go and like they might increase their reverse lunge by 10 pounds in a week, but they see another person going and they're doing 20 more pounds than them. And like, so it's not even a thought of, oh, like I improved. It was more of a, well, I'm not there. But it's like that mindset shift of like, okay, where did you go? And like, where have you come from? Like that process. And then competing with yourself, where you see, I think like more college and also like some of the professional guys, like they know what works for them, like their process, and they're competing with themselves a lot to then be able to improve upon for themselves. Like, so it's kind of working on refining that process to find the consistencies that work to further improve them. And they're really focused on like, hey, like I've gotten this far doing this, like this is my process that I need to do. And they're not focused on, oh, like obviously it's important, but it's not, I don't see it being the main goal of like, hey, I need to go and do a sumo deadlift of X amount to like feel satisfied with that lift. It's, I'm going to work on my form and technique and like really be focused on feeling what I'm supposed to feel to improve. And then you see that growth because they're building that strong foundation. Where, like I said, you see some high schoolers going and they're trying to put as much weight as they can. The form might falter because they want to get like those, that ego, like the numbers of an ego type of thing to get
Oh, yeah.
there. So I think that's like the big difference that I see is like, I would say like sum up, it was like, they're more outcome focused of what it is and like ego focused. And like the pro guys are much more process and like task focused.
It's so cool that you brought up the whole idea of comparison, because literally, I mean, I had my coworker on the podcast a couple episodes ago, and we were talking about that, literally competition being used as a driver and not comparing yourself to others, because it's just going to get you out of your own grind. And we talked a little bit about, you know, how the people that deal with this especially are younger people and high schoolers. So it's cool that you brought it up, because it just affirms some of the things that people are dealing with, and then that can help prepare, you know, you and people like myself who have you know, access to some of these kids, and feel like, you know, figure out better ways to help them use that comparison, you know, conscious, not comparison is how we said it last time, you know.
I like that.
Yeah, it's like you're conscious of the other person, but you're not comparing yourself to them.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you for breaking down that kind of differentiation for me. Can we talk a little bit about the earlier parts of your career, and specifically some of the things that you learned early on from your experiences and what you took with you to where you're at now?
Yeah, I think, well, I mean, I'm still relatively early because graduated in um, graduated in May of 2020.
Okay.
So I think that kind of puts it as things that I've gone and like still learning, obviously, because like I'm now in the role rather than learning about the role.
True.
So it's still pretty early.
Okay.
I think the big takeaway for myself is just that kind of learning is like anything you do, like development takes time, I think is like my big takeaway right now. And that could be in anything. It's most likely you could have a plan of what you want or where you want to be at a certain time, but it's going to take time and it most likely isn't going to go exactly as planned. Which might sound not the most positive, but at the same time, it's important to go and look back and reflect on how things are going, and see like what progress you have made. Because if you're constantly looking forward of what you want, you're kind of missing at the here and now, like what you've accomplished. So like I kind of put that for myself as in terms of like building a clientele base and like building rapport with athletes. Like it's been like months of process of like, hey, like I said, like that patience before of I was working with no clients type of thing because you're building that rapport. And now you're starting to like see the fruits of that labor of like you've built the relationships. You're starting to get a couple of sessions working with kids consistently or with athletes consistently. So it's really like that reflection, but knowing, hey, I'm still not at what I want to get to, but like knowing it takes time and patience to be able to get to that point, I think is the real big like takeaway from what I'm kind of seeing. Obviously, you throw in different things. Like I said, it doesn't go the way you think. Like you throw in a pandemic when you like finish with your master's, you throw in like a lot of stuff happening. So it's just that thing of things happen and develop at their own speed, but what you can control is like the effort you put into them and kind of realizing where you started and where you've kind of come to.
I love that so much, dude. That's very encouraging for myself, and I'm sure very encouraging for everyone that's listening. So thank you again. In terms of specific concepts, I want to get into a few sort of discussion type topics with you here.
Hmm.
A phrase that you hear a lot in communication, in building rapport, and in active listening. There's this term that's thrown around a lot. It's called, walking in someone else's shoes.
Hmm.
And myself, I'm about 2 years as a personal trainer now, and I'm going through physical therapy assistant school. And in terms of client trainer relationship, um, listening and coaching, motivating, a huge part. And then in terms of dealing with patients, people who have are suffering from injuries and may not be in a positive place.
Hmm.
I was wondering if you could just talk to me a little bit about what you feel that phrase "walking in someone else's shoes" means, and how you can best take that and live it out in your
Hmm.
career.
Yeah. I think walking in someone else's shoes, the biggest, I guess, strategy or skill is like being able to like first of all listen to what they're saying is like the biggest thing and know what they're talking about from that person's perspective. So like, and you might like people might say like, oh, listening, like I can do that, that's easy, but like listening takes a lot of effort, a lot of concentration, and like, are you fully listening to the person? I think that's the big key to kind of being able to walk in that person's shoes. Because I kind of say like, are you listening to understand the person, or are you listening to respond to the person? Is kind of that big like thing. Because if you're listening to respond, you're thinking of a response to that person of what you want to say rather than what they're actually trying to say. So I think that's like the big piece of it. Because if you go and you're listening to understand, you're asking follow-up questions, you're going and kind of asking them what's going on, what they're trying to say, and then learning how that situation is impacting them personally. Where if someone says like, oh, I went and say like struck out, or like someone went and like they got injured and it's the same injury, say an ACL injury, and you've had the same one, and you just assume that your experience is the same as theirs, then like that's not going to be walking in their shoes. Like you might have had the same injury, but it's going to impact that person completely different than how it
Mm.
impacted you. So that's where being able to listen about their experiences, how that experience impacted them personally, what they're going through, what coping skills they have, what resources they have, kind of how they're dealing with it is going to impact them differently. So I think the biggest thing is like listening to understand of what they're saying, um, and how they're saying it. Because like you can also pull a lot from how they're saying this stuff. Like you hear all the time if someone says how are you, and someone could say fine, and fine just by the word could be so many different things. They could say fine and like say it positively. They could say fine with their head down. Like so, really seeing like how they say it, what they say, and that's also where, ironically, in terms of like counseling and like doing different like mental performance skills and like working with athletes, at times it's actually easier to like work on mental performance in sports that you don't know, because then you're learning that sport or like what they're going through from their whole perspective. So like if I don't know anything about, say, like tennis or like wrestling, and they start explaining like the scoring systems or like moves they do, I might have no idea what that is. So I have to then ask the athlete what they like their definition of it. So you get to hear their perspective, and you're learning all from them. So you don't have any preconceived notions or like biases towards it. So you're learning completely from them, and you can stop them if they're going too fast to then say, hey, can you explain this to me? Which then builds even better rapport with them, because then you're understanding it and you're not like, oh, they say, I went and threw and my arm didn't feel good. And in that sense, like since I play baseball and like
Mm.
coach baseball and all that, I might think like, oh, I know what that means, and not ask a follow-up question. But if you don't play that sport and someone's like, oh, like I'm up 15 love, I might have no idea what that is. Like let them explain what it is, rather than if you know what it is, you might not ask those deeper diving questions to get a better understanding.
And yeah, sounds like it's all about just going into it with that like open mind, learning. Let me learn from you.
Yeah.
Let's help each other kind of mindset. It's
Yeah.
yeah, it's cool that you're saying that too, because it's reaffirming some things that I feel that recently I've been trying to practice a little bit more, especially with what you're saying about not knowing the sport very well. And you used wrestling in particular because I recently gained a client who is a wrestler, and so I just had no idea about the scoring or anything like that. So
Yeah.
I was asking him like, hey, like I've worked with, athletes before, but never with a wrestler. So talk to me a little bit. And he's just very encouraged and was eager to kind of explain it to me. And then I guess, would you say it's just my job as a professional to just keep listening and keep providing my affirmations of what they're saying and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think your role with that is to go and kind of keep listening and learning, and like obviously like, and if it is like taking notes on some of the stuff he says, so then you can go back with that information. So like when you see him again and he mentions something, he can see, or he or she can see the like that thing of like, hey, like he listened to me, he was able to remember what it was, and then now he's starting to use some of that language back
Mm.
with him or her, which also makes it that much more important for them because it shows that you care about what they're talking about. And that's also, the better you build that relationship with them, the more invested you get in like with them, because you're building a better relationship. So the more that you are going to care about it, because now it's like, hey, I remember that this person went and told me about like their weekend, and that might be something about something they enjoy doing, of it playing an instrument or something. So then if you can build that rapport, you start getting to know the person better, you start learning more about them, and now, hey, I'm now more invested in their life by learning more about them, which can also help you even more kind of, I don't say, well, like you kind of start out with walk in their shoes, but like
Mm.
be invested in, like have an easier time listening to them, because now it's building that like professional relationship with them, about what's going on in their life.
I need to take notes more because I can't remember everything, and
Yeah.
I just feel bad sometimes when I have to ask a question that I know I've asked before,
Mm,
and but just like you said, how you're in this career and you're still going, you're still learning. I'm still going, I'm still learning too. So
mm,
things that I'm just going to continue to work on, continue to improve upon. So
exactly.
that's awesome, man. What are some ways that you handle information that's given to you, or a topic that a athlete wants to discuss, something that's like really um, sensitive, or it's something that like, that's negative or kind of uncomfortable for them to talk about? Um, and where do you draw lines or boundaries with that, if anything?
Yeah, I think the big thing is, I think that shows that if they're willing to share that information with me,
Mm-hmm.
that I've done like a good job, at least in the initial part, of building a good rapport and relationship with them. Because if they're willing to share that information, that means that they're comfortable with the space that I've provided them and willing to share that with me, even if it is uncomfortable for them. So I think that's the big thing, is like making sure they know that you're providing a safe space, of like that information is going to go and kind of be kept between you and them. It's going to be going and used as, not as a judgment way, but more of a way, hey, this is something I want to work on. So I think that's like a almost, I don't want to say a compliment, but it kind of reaffirms for myself that I provided that for the athlete. And I think that's the biggest thing, is just being able to go, providing that safe space with them. And then you're going to be in a non-judgmental state, but rather you're inviting them into a situation to make sure that they're comfortable talking. And then also that you want to make sure that you're getting a good understanding of what they're talking about. You don't want to assume they say, oh, I'm feeling upset about a certain situation, and then just assume, okay, here we go. Now I'm going to rattle off 5 techniques for you to be able to go and improve that, because that person's coming to you for help in that sensitive situation. And if they wanted advice or to just be given the answer, they're most likely not going to go to you. They'd probably go to their friends or their parents or whoever they're involved with, where like that's a time for you to then step in and kind of explore it with them, get a really good understanding, and going back to almost walking into their shoes of being able to go understand the whole situation, where they're coming from, and then let them kind of, through guided questions, be able to answer certain questions about themselves and of that situation. So like the big one will be finding patterns of that situation. What kind of causes these emotions you might be having? And that could just be building that self-awareness of, hey, let's start monitoring over the next week. Like, when do these feelings arise for you? And like, what situations happened prior to causing these feelings to arise? And then once you start finding those patterns and consistencies of what's causing this sensitive or uneasy feeling, we can then start looking at, okay, this is what's causing it. Now it's time to be able to go and see what strategies they've used in the past, kind of what they're currently trying to do to cope with it or overcome it, what's worked in the past, what hasn't worked in the past. And then that allows you to then get, after getting that whole understanding about them, to then possibly start looking at other solutions or other techniques to improve upon the situation they're in. So I think the big thing is making sure that they feel comfortable. They know you're not going to be like a judgmental thing, but more someone to talk to. And for some people, that might be all it needs. They just need to like vent it out and like get it all out to someone who's not going to know they're not going to respond and judge them, question what's going on, give them a quick hitter advice type of situation. Because like that's what most of society wants to do. Like when someone says there's something going on, it's, oh, well, have you tried this, or have you done this or this or this?
I got an exercise for that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's not a, hey, I want to understand what's going on. It's more of a, hey, let's do a real like Band-Aid quick fix and see if that helps.
It takes time. Development takes time.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Development, like I said, it's like something that doesn't just apply to like work or whatever it is, but development does take time.
Another thing I wanted to ask you about, man, thank you for that. A couple of my athletes, there's one in particular that I'm thinking of off the top of my head, just they play a lot of sports, right? Especially the high school ones, multiple sports. And what's great about that is that there's different movement patterns, different ways that they can challenge themselves, express themselves with their play style, with their techniques. There's definitely a positive in that regard. For example, like lateral movement in basketball can also be, like similarly trained when you're training for football and you're building that lateral quickness. But oftentimes I find myself coming back to the notion that perhaps playing multiple sports at one time has, some risks that come along with it. Most notably like overtraining. But I guess I wanted to ask your opinion about what that does to an athlete's mental space and whether or not you can think of specific times that you've dealt with that or you've noticed that, affecting them in a way.
Yeah, I think it all depends on where that drive for them is coming from. So like if they're playing multiple sports and that's fun for them and that's what they want to do type of thing, I think that's a key part that's going to impact like the mental side of it. So if they're being forced to play multiple sports because like mom or dad wants them to play multiple sports or like friends are doing it, it's not fun for them, then that's where I think it become detrimental, because then they're just being forced into all these different tasks. They're not doing kind of what they want to do. And that's kind of where you can get into some trouble in terms of, hey, like my schedule's booked, like I can't hang out with friends, I can't do this. But like if it's something they physically want to do and have fun doing, then by all means, I think that's the biggest indicator of like where that's coming from. If they're internally wanting to go and play them, great. Like, and that's what they want to spend their weekends and weeks doing, that's awesome. But if it's being driven by like parents doing it or like them going and like feeling pressured to do it, then that could really be detrimental for them. And that's where you kind of can get into things of like being burnt out and just not want to do it because it's just overwhelming. And it's like, this is too much for me. And I think that also comes with the same thing of doing just one sport of, if they love doing it and like that's what they love to do, by all means go and do it. But if it's, hey, I like playing multiple sports, but I have to play this one sport because, once again, there's like your definite statement of like I have to, um,
Yeah,
of
exactly.
like I have to play one sport because that's what's going to get me to play in college and all that stuff. Then like that's also could be detrimental because then you're just doing one thing all the time and there's your overuse injuries like physically but also mentally, just like the burnout of like I'm only like I'm doing this, doing that, and it's all for this one sport. And if it
Mm,
becomes too much and too repetitive for them, it could be this is too much for me to be doing. I get bored of it or I'm tired of it. So once again, it comes down to, is it up to the athlete of how much they're investing, or is it because of other circumstances that's causing them to then do multiple sports or just one sport?
mm. Makes a lot of sense. Makes so much sense because every situation is going to be different.
Mm,
So that's good to just see it in that way, and then of
yeah,
course just deal with each situation as it comes, and each one differently. So perfect.
yeah.
I wanted to ask you what the 7 mental skills are. You mentioned that a little bit earlier, and that's something
Uh,
I want to hear about. I know
yeah.
one of them is probably that self-awareness, right?
Yeah, I think, yeah, for the my like pre-evaluation
Oh,
one that I do to just like see what they know.
mm,
I go through like some of the ones I ask of like their knowledge of is like motivation, self-talk, attention slash like concentration, um, arousal or activation regulation, um, relaxation techniques, coping strategies, goal setting, self-talk, mental toughness, and there might be one more. I can't remember all of them off the top of my head.
no
But like
worry.
those are the main ones to like kind of just get like a general understanding of where they're at with these different skills, because like that's also I tell them like a way to provide like a pre and post test. Like this is going to be your initial, and then once again like parents or like like to show that what you're doing is being effective, it's a way to then do it again later down the road and say like, hey, like this is where you started in terms of your knowledge or your ability to implement this skill. You went from a 4 now to like a 7, to like show that growth, is the thing main objective for doing that, to like once again how I said like to show that growth, not thinking like, oh, I'm still not good at this, but then you can then show them potentially like numerically or empirically like, hey, like actually like you have improved. It might not be where you want to be, but like you have made improvements since we started working together. So I think that's like the big thing. And like those skills, like there's a lot of other like different skills, but those are ones just to get like key understandings of where they are at themselves.
Yeah, that's cool that it's almost like there's a value that you can measure, and it's just like how fast you can throw or how much you can lift. Like
Yeah,
I love working with people because it's complicated for sure, but
yeah,
there is a way to measure growth, and growth is oftentimes what we're looking for.
yeah. And I think that's the big thing, is just like finding ways to make the mental side physical or like visible essentially, is like the big piece of it. So like trying to see different things, like working with people of like kind of saying like, how can I monitor the mental side? So I just said like, well, why don't we come up with different like sayings that you have, or how positive or neutral you were in a situation, and like if you check those boxes for each workout or each thing you do, then that's a way to like visually and physically see how you've improved over like a span of time, rather than, oh, I think I went and just did um like this well, or my mindset might have been better, but like now if we can write out like say 4 or 5 tasks you want to like do during a workout and say like grade yourself after each one, then you can see progress throughout those that time, rather than just assuming that you might be getting better or think I haven't grown anymore.
Perfect. Yeah, we all know what assuming does,
Yeah.
so don't do it. Um, just to wrap things up, I wanted to see if I can get one word of advice, one piece of advice from you to anyone that's a health and wellness professional, anyone that's a coach that works with people. How can we step up our care and our empathetic response to help
Hmm.
people grow?
Um, I think the big thing, I'm going to go back to kind of what I said with like listening. I think that's going to be your big one, because a key thing I think in my masters that you kind of learn is like, no matter who you're working with, if they have something going on, they're gonna bring you back to where they want you to be, if that makes sense. Like the athlete's gonna bring you back to where they want to be. So if you can pick up on those similarities, like say you can ask a question and be completely off of what they're thinking, but if they constantly mention like school like 5 or 6 times and keep like you see that conversation keeps going back to like school, then it's like, okay, I might have asked some questions that were incorrect or not where they want to go, but they're going to lead you back to where they want to ultimately go. So I think if you can listen and pick up on those key patterns, then you can kind of get into what they want to work on, which then, as I said before, is going to build that rapport, that relationship, to be able to then go and kind of learn about what they're doing, and then plays a massive role in how they're feeling about you. And then it also shows that you're taking a genuine interest in what they're doing, rather than just like, oh, they just came over to talk to me by like checking a box of, oh, they checked in with me. But
Mm.
by doing this, like you can show like, hey, I care. I'm going to learn more about you, and kind of give you that like empathetic response of what's going on, to be able to go and better understand what they're doing. And by being more invested in them is also going to make your life easier, because you're going to care more about them, because you're going to learn more about what they're doing and ultimately what goals they have going forward.
All right. Thank you for the people in the back. Listen, pick up on key patterns. Awesome, man. Thank you so much. This has been very stimulating for me. It's got me hyped up, got me thinking about things that I want to improve upon, things that I want to help give to others
Mm.
here with this platform that I have created through you. So very much thank you for your help, Matt. Can you take a moment and just kind of plug where people can find you, and just, if they want to learn more information about ATP and about the work that you're doing there? um, yeah.
Yeah, so I recently created a like professional Instagram account, which is like M Rieger mental performance. I guess we'll put in like notes or whatever, like Rieger's Rieger.
Yes, sir.
Um, so like that's where my like professional Instagram is going to be. So like I recently started posting like kind of like minute videos. It's called like Mental Dive Monday. Um, as like different things, just like kind of start thinking about the mental side, and like it's not going to be like obviously in a minute super in depth or super like that, but it's kind of just get people thinking about the mental side. A couple of quick things in terms of to be aware of and raise that awareness of the mental side. So I think that's a great place to start, to kind of look at that. And then obviously it's an open one, so you can follow me on that, DM me with any questions that you have, and those also get posted on ATP's Instagram.
Mm.
And that's something where I want conversation to happen. Like I want people to ask questions about kind of what the video is on, or like different things that they want to work on, because I want that to be an open platform, because the ultimate goal is to normalize like mental skills and mental skills training for people, and make it like not a, hey, once again, the stigma of it, but hey, this is a normal process that everyone could work on. So definitely want to like get conversations going and have that grow.
That was awesome, man. Looking at those mental dive Mondays, been loving them so far. Have you ever thought about using like TikTok for something like that?
Yeah, we do have someone who's been like, ATP does a good amount of TikToks. I still have to think of like content of what would actually go on that to like make it like more, like I don't want to say funny, but like informational and as well as funny. So possibly
Yeah,
down the road, one piece of like content at a time, because those things take time to produce and kind of do. So definitely, possibly down the road, we'll see.
I downloaded the app because me and my coworker started a TikTok, but it's just it's complicated to use, and I don't understand how these people just like come up with this stuff just so easily. It's like it's like a video editor software just right in your phone, but it takes a while. I think that's just repetition too, like making
Yeah,
videos and
practice.
learning
Yeah.
how. But well, cool.
Yeah, so the main one would be Instagram, like M Rieger Mental Performance would be the main Instagram for like content on mental performance skills.
Awesome. And I'm gonna throw a link to that when I post this. And Yeah, dude. So again, thanks so much for coming out. Really appreciate you. Keep on fighting the good fight. Keep on doing the work. Over here at Sets and Reps, we put in repetition every single day, living out life like it's one giant set. And you got to put in the reps to get the results. So thanks for coming by.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right.